When Marie Smith's daughter went missing, she could hardly take the heartache. I called everybody I knew, anybody I could think of, and nobody had heard from her. Her name was Cassandra Cantrell, and she'd been missing for 2 days. Her friend Kirsty said, "This can't be happening, this isn't real. She's lost her phone, she's lost her car, she has no money. I just don't know, anything could have happened to her, it's really emotional." And as Cassandra's family and friends grappled with her disappearance, police got to work to piece together what could have possibly happened before Cassandra had gone missing. According to family and friends, Cassandra was very responsible. She would always call and let her friends or family know where she was going. She was close to her family and had a really good relationship with them. She enjoyed making YouTube shopping videos, loved being on stage, and even once joined a local production of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, where people act alongside the movie. Friends described her as adorable. Cassandra was 33 at the time that she went missing, and was not classed as somebody that would just run off. She had nothing to run from. As detectives got to work and canvassed the area around where Marie and Cassandra lived, and found on a neighbour's security camera a clip of Cassandra's white Mazda on the drive on the morning of the 25th, leaving the neighbourhood, but the car was never seen coming back. As hours ticked by and no sign of Cassandra, her family and friends tried to remain hopeful. It was particularly difficult for Cassandra's twin brother Rob, as growing up the two had been inseparable and would stay up late at night to watch scary movies together. Her friend described her as tough. "She's a tough girl." Her brother said that as they got older, their shared passion for movies evolved into collecting memorabilia, and they even dreamed of opening their own collectible shop. But as close as they were, Rob couldn't imagine where his sister went, and he was filled with remorse about their last conversation. "We were having an argument," he said. "She wanted to actually come over on the 25th, but I ignored her. The 25th of August 2020 was the last day that she was seen." The family organised searches, and many people got involved trying to search for Cassandra. Everybody was looking for clues online and searching in woodlands and areas around where she lived. And then 3 days after Cassandra vanished, police found the white Mazda, unlocked and with the key still inside. It was almost underneath Interstate 705, which goes into the heart of downtown Tacoma. It's an industrial area where groups of homeless people often camp in tents. But with her car in that area, why would she go down there? And what happened to her? It was a strange place for a young woman to park and then go missing. Alarm bells were going off as family was informed that her car had been found. Many more questions than answers. It was clear that she'd gotten ready to go somewhere that day. But where did she go? And who did she see? The detective on the case had ordered an emergency trace on Cassandra's cell phone to try and find her last known location. And he discovered that her last phone pinged about 2 miles south of a tower on Vashon Island in the Puget Sound. The detective said that one of the first things I did was just get on Google Earth, strike an arc from the tower to see where it lands. And it showed us landing around this shoreline at Owen Beach or Point Defiance Park. So they stood on the shoreline and looked out at the body of water. "We're just seeing this huge body of water," they said. "We're never going to be able to find her in there, surely." Investigators chasing that last ping from Cassandra's cell phone knew it was somewhere in that vast water, which was nearly 100 miles long. But what was the next step in trying to recover it? They could not drain that huge lake. They debated about it because it was like a needle in a haystack, the detective said, a huge body of water. But then they had a starting point. He knew that somebody had likely tossed the phone into the water from maybe Owen Beach, so finding it was a long shot, but the detective said he brought the Pierce County Metro dive team out to the beach on a summer day. And we got lucky with the tides that day because the tide was extremely low, so it made the search area a little less. They had a plan to reduce the area where the phone might be. First, he asked members of his team to throw stones from the beach line to simulate how far somebody could possibly throw a cell phone. So investigators had ordered a trace on Cassandra's cell phone to try and identify her last known location. But the phone had pinged 2 miles south of a tower and they believed it was in this water. The dive team then formed a line, essentially creating an underwater dragnet. They had a boat out in the water and a line of people on snorkel that day. They were told that Cassandra's phone had a case decorated with glitter, so the dive team was in the water for a little more than about an hour. Then, incredibly, one of the guys on the line shouted, "Hey, I think I've got it." They saw a sparkle. "I've got the phone, I've got the phone." The phone was sent to a specialist to determine if any information could possibly be recovered. The hunt to find Cassandra was intensifying, and as detectives learned more about her, she felt like she could tell you pretty much anything, one of the friends said, that was going on in her life. She would always tell you what was going on. Even her deepest, darkest secrets, she would always tell me first. And a month before she disappeared, Cassandra had confided a secret to her best friend. She'd texted me a positive pregnancy test and said, "I think I might be preggers." But for the detective, learning that Cassandra might have been pregnant at the time of her disappearance changed everything. "This is what is now piquing my interest," he had said. Now, normally in a situation where a pregnant woman disappears, you look at who the partner is first. Cassandra had also told her mother that she was pregnant and didn't provide details. The detective asked the friend, Marie, if Cassandra had told her who the father was. But the answer was that it was just some guy that she'd met online or through some kind of dating app. It was not somebody that she was actually seeing, and he didn't even live in the area. So it was no secret that Cassandra was actively dating, using apps like Tinder. And then the old boyfriend came up. Cassandra had still been in touch with Colin Dudley. The two had dated back in 2006 while in the Rocky Horror acting group. Colin had played a character called the criminologist on stage. Outside of the stage, when he wasn't performing, he was the lead of tech, and he kind of ran the cast. But after dating for several months, Dudley and Cassandra broke up. Colin started a relationship with another cast member, Rebecca, and the two eventually moved in together. But he was into some strange things. Dungeons and Dragons, but not the board game. No, not the traditional board game. It was more of a theatre of the mind type gameplay, doing things that you wouldn't normally do in real life. Role play, a wizard, a rogue, a fighter. The game always took place in Dudley's basement. Colin was a kind of dungeon master and the one who ran the show. Apart from playing strange games and apparently dating Cassandra, nobody really knew much about him. The detective set to work on looking into Colin. Apparently, he liked to cook for people and invite them round. He was a chef by profession, and people described his food as really good. In 2014, after his father had died, he rekindled a friendship with Cassandra. Her friend was concerned. "Why are you getting back involved with him?" "Oh, I just want to be there as a friend for him," Cassandra had said. "But he's got a girlfriend." Cassandra and Colin would sometimes watch movies or grab a bite to eat at some point. And this was even though Colin was with Rebecca. He was in a relationship. But while he was living with Rebecca, He then started a relationship with Cassandra once again. It turned romantic, and Cassandra had confided in a friend that Colin was the father of her baby. So the detectives thought maybe they might have a motive here for Colin. He was in a relationship with Rebecca. He'd just got Cassandra pregnant, but did he know? Apparently Cassandra was very excited. She talked about it. She was talking about names and games she was going to play at the baby shower. She had an Amazon registry already made up. But Cassandra's only hesitation when it came to the baby was whether or not she was going to tell Colin. He was with Rebecca now, and he had mentioned he didn't want to have kids. It was later revealed that Colin did know about Cassandra's pregnancy, and apparently he was fine with it. Which is strange because he was with another girl and he'd already said that he did not want children. Cassandra had called a friend and said, "Well, I've told him, and it went better than I expected. He was calm and said not to worry about it and that we'd talk later." The detectives decided they needed to speak to Colin, so they sat him down. They talked with him on his front porch, and the conversation was recorded. So the detectives started out with simple questions at first. "Hey, tell us about you and Cassandra. How did you meet?" Colin stated that he'd met her at the Rocky Picture Show, as we know, and then he said that they were in a relationship for a couple of months and broke up in 2006. The detective then mentioned the baby and the pregnancy and asked Colin about it. They said, talking to people, talking to Cassandra's family and some of the friends, they reported that she was about 10 weeks pregnant and that you are the father. Colin then said, "No way. No, hell no." Dudley was adamant he and Cassandra were not in a relationship. He was most definitely not the father of her child. The detective said, "Are you sure? No one-night stands, no meeting up or no hookups?" But Colin replied, "No, absolutely not." In fact, Colin insisted he hadn't seen or spoken to Cassandra since they broke up back in 2006, except for once when they ran into each other in a mall. So the detective asked him some further questions. "So you haven't had any further contact with her since you broke up? No messages, no Facebook, nothing?" "No," Colin said. The detectives believed that Colin was lying, but how could they prove it? But it turned out a clue to finding the answer was in the paperwork. Now the detectives believed that Colin was lying when he said he had not seen or spoken to Cassandra for years. But it was Cassandra's mother, Marie Smith, who provided some proof. She had been combing through Cassandra's old phone bills when she noticed a mystery number that kept reappearing. "We didn't know whose it was," her mother said, "because it didn't have a name attached to it." So they started looking back into the past. They looked back months and months, as far back as they could see. And this number kept popping up. The last time it popped up was the morning Cassandra disappeared. So the detective looked into this number and they immediately knew it was Colin's. So the detectives asked the forensic investigators to take a closer look at Colin's phone. The detectives had taken it from him when they met him on the front porch that day. They told him that they had a warrant to seize the phone and read him the warrant out. They grabbed the phone and left. Now investigators obtained the phone records for both Cassandra and Dudley's phones. They were turned over to police. Now, the cell phone forensic analysis for the Sheriff's Department said that the name Cassandra never appeared in Colin's phone. But what name was he using for Cassandra? Apparently, it went under the name of Velma. But why Velma? They'd learnt through Cassandra's mother that she had gone as Velma from Scooby-Doo as a Halloween costume. Likely he did not want his girlfriend to know that he was still in touch with Cassandra. Even without the information from her waterlogged phone, they were able to see when and where she and Colin interacted simply by having those phone records. It's very helpful, the detective said, in determining where somebody was during a critical time frame. People have a cell phone with them almost every day, all day. So the phone records showed Cassandra's white Mazda driving to the spot where it was found, but had Cassandra or someone else parked it there? Now, detectives knew the city's light rail system was nearby and asked their security if they could have any footage of Cassandra's car passing by, and what they provided was crucial. The video has never been shown publicly, but in the video from a moving light rail train taken the late morning on August 25th, the detective could see a man in a black hat walking away from where Cassandra's car was parked. Then a different camera shows that same man from a much closer angle. He was wearing all black, the blue gloves, and the hat, and he just sits down at the shop. The time was 11:50 a.m. on the camera, on the footage, and the man sits there for about 4 minutes and then starts walking. Now he gets up and continues walking. His face is covered by some type of mask, it's hard to see, but based on his build and gait, the detectives believed that it was Colin Dudley. The detective had been told that Colin often had asked, or demanded even, that people call him Hat or Hatman. Strangely enough, as he was always wearing a hat. Apparently he would put it on and switch into his persona of the Hatman and preferred to be called the Hatman. The persona was basically the main character from The Clockwork Orange, very dark and intentionally so, morally dubious. In the video from the light rail system, the man in the hat keeps walking right into the Tacoma Dome station parking garage, only blocks away from where Cassandra's car was found. They asked security personnel at the garage if they had any footage, and the answer was yes. So they find him walking into the parking garage to a truck. You can see him using a remote control opener, gets into the truck, and then as he exits the parking garage, you can see him pretty clearly in the video and the license plate, which comes back to Mr. Colin Dudley. That was Colin's Chevy truck, proving that he was the main man in the video and looked like he was responsible for Cassandra's disappearance. They immediately went round to Colin Dudley's house. At this point, they didn't have Cassandra, they didn't have a body, and they had no true evidence that Cassandra was dead. They were still hoping that maybe she was tied up somewhere in some kind of basement. But 6 days after Cassandra had gone missing, a SWAT team burst into Colin Dudley's house. Authorities were out in force after they raided Colin Dudley's house, but they found no sign of Cassandra. Cassandra was not found inside. Colin was temporarily detained to do fingerprints and DNA. Investigators also seized several items from the house, including Colin's Chevy truck and the black hat. They weren't sure at the time if it was the same hat that he was wearing in the video or not, but it did look pretty similar. There were numerous areas that they had identified in the basement that were possible DNA or blood evidence, and they said that the cadaver dog showed particular interest in the basement, specifically around a brown sofa. The detectives believed that something terrible had happened to Cassandra, and at this point, Colin Dudley had stopped talking to investigators, but his girlfriend, Rebecca, agreed to sit down for an interview. The detectives asked her, "Do you think your boyfriend, Colin, is capable of hurting Cassandra?" There was a 13-second pause while she thought about the question. "Well, physics would say yes, he's got the size and strength. But I don't think he would. No, he wouldn't." The investigators could not prove otherwise, and Dudley was to go free. As family asked why can you not arrest him? Surely you have enough evidence. Well, he's guilty of something, the detective felt, but what? Moving her car? The detectives knew that Colin Dudley was their man, but needed to find more evidence to put him there. As the detectives started questioning Colin, they wanted to know every move he made on August the 25th, the day that Cassandra went missing. And the detective said that it became very clear that Dudley had hatched a well thought out plot to get rid of Cassandra. He had planned this. He had probably was pretty meticulous in the planning. In his police interview, Colin said that early on the morning Cassandra disappeared, he'd visited Costco. So the first stop the detective made was to go to the Costco garage and ask for CCTV footage. That was 6:31 a.m. Then he went to a second Costco to pick up supplies for what he had told detectives was a spring cleaning session. One of those things that most people do after they've committed a crime, right? Red flag. Investigators subpoenaed receipts that the store provided and the video surveillance cameras picked up Dudley in the store around 7 a.m. The video surveillance was so clear, it was obvious that it was Colin. As they looked at the video, they could possibly make out heavy-duty trash bags, and then he goes back to the house. Detectives said that Colin dropped off the supplies at the home and drove to the Tacoma Dome station parking garage, arriving at 8:17 a.m. They had surveillance footage of that too, which shows that the truck again, now in the back you see a bike, and then you're seeing him get out, put on his helmet, on his bike, and he rides it away. Dudley left his truck in the garage and began pedaling home. It took him about 20 minutes. Investigators believed that he wanted to be home by 9 a.m. because, as it turns out, he and Cassandra had made plans to meet at his house. Sure enough, records showed that Cassandra was outside Colin's house at 8:49 a.m. But these messages were deleted from his phone. So the two phones are then pinpointed in the same location at the house for a couple of hours. And for a little more than 2 hours, neither phone showed any movement. And it was during this period of time investigators believe that Colin Dudley killed Cassandra Cantrell. Now, investigators say that around 11:40 a.m, Colin Dudley turned off his cell phone. As Cassandra's phone showed it moving away from the house, the detective said that because Colin had her phone with him as he drove the car to the spot where he abandoned it, near the light rail station, he turns the cell phone off but doesn't turn her phone off. And as he's driving around with it, apparently he wasn't quite as smart as he thought he was. And you see Dudley in the hat walking away from her car. Remember how he paused for a few moments and sat down? Then he believes he's gathering himself after possibly murdering Cassandra. I think he was just physically tired because of probably how violent the incident was, and then retrieved his truck from the garage where he had stashed it earlier that day, drove to Owen Beach and tossed Cassandra's phone into the Pugnit Sound, which was where the last ping came from. And at around 12:45 p.m, but while investigators had discovered her phone in the water, they'd still not found Cassandra. They had no idea what Colin had done to her, but they did have his Chevy Colorado truck. Investigators knew that certain technologies that cars kept electronic evidence contained in them. Almost every car or truck has reams of data that can be extracted. So this is where the major break in the case came through. People feel that if they turn their cell phones off, you will not necessarily be able to track them, but you can't turn off your car's black box. The detectives got a warrant to search the truck's black box, essentially a computer that tracks the records nearly every move a vehicle makes. He reviewed the data, which confirmed much of what they already knew from the phone records, but there was something new that caught everyone's attention. The truck's black box had a record of Colin Dudley's movements on the 26th, the day after Cassandra had visited his house. They noticed where the vehicle stops. It's a large wooded ravine. On September the 22nd, 2020, the detectives rushed to that ravine, which is 8 miles from Colin Dudley's house. It was nearly a month since Cassandra had gone missing, As they got there, they looked over the hillside and you could clearly see there was a garbage can, and you could see that the bin liner had ropes around it. He also spotted blood. They clearly at this point knew that they had remains. The detectives were at the scene and wanted to have a quick identification so that they could tell the family, so that they could arrest Colin. They knew that Cassandra had a distinctive tattoo and they had the photo of it. So they came walking up the hill and immediately saw the tattoo. It was Cassandra Cantrell. She was dead, and the detective's heart sank when he thought about calling Cassandra's mother to explain that he had found her. He called Marie Smith and told her that they had information that they needed to share with her. Her mother's first question was, "Is she okay?" The detective said, "No, I'm sorry, she's not." Cassandra's twin brother Rob overheard the phone call, and the second he heard it, he started screaming. Colin Dudley was arrested that night and later charged with first-degree murder. Investigators felt they had built a strong case, so strong they decided not to try and retrieve the information on Cassandra's waterlogged phone. The case took 2 years to come to trial. Cassandra's friends and family heard that prosecutors were considering making a plea deal with Colin. They couldn't believe it. This was premeditated. It was literally cold-blooded. They had no words and a lot of anger. Cassandra had been an optimist. She never lost that, even up until the end, and I believe that she entered that house hopeful. Hopeful that Colin was getting comfortable with her pregnancy and believing that he was going to be a dad. Investigators believed that he brutally murdered her, and an autopsy revealed exactly how brutal it was. There were fractures, major fractures to her skull. She hit her head many times. The cause of death was blunt force trauma. Investigators say they were never able to identify a murder weapon, but they did find those traces of blood in his basement, on the walls and on the floors, and in the laundry room sink. Police believe that Colin cleaned the basement multiple times after killing Cassandra and kept her body there overnight before dumping it in the ravine the next morning. And they believe that Colin's living girlfriend Rebecca was home during this time. They could not find any evidence to suggest that Rebecca knew what had gone on, that she had anything to do with it. And they kept separate areas of the house, and so I could see, her doing her own thing and not going down to the basement. But Rebecca did confirm to police that Colin never wanted to be a father. He did not want to be a dad. The police believed this was a very strong case, at least circumstantially. They had a great deal of physical evidence, and it was a case that relied on essentially digital records. They had the video of Cassandra's car leaving, the phone records placing Cassandra at Colin's house the morning she disappeared, and the data showing Colin's truck where Cassandra's remains were eventually found. For the prosecutors, it seemed like a lot, but they were concerned about convincing a jury at trial. They had no eyewitnesses, no murder weapon or confession. So when the defence offered to accept a plea deal, the prosecutors negotiated, and eventually Colin Dudley agreed to plead guilty to murder in the first degree for killing Cassandra. But the prosecutors brought the deal to Cassandra's family, and they were furious. On November the 14th, 2022, more than 2 years after Cassandra had died, Colin Dudley was formally entered a plea of guilty. With regard to murder in the first degree, how do you plead, they asked him. Guilty. He was sentenced to 26 years in prison. Her family and friends said that they had no words that they could even comprehend the frustration and anger and sadness and heartache that they all had. Not only had they lost Cassandra, but they had lost her baby, their grandchild. Colin Dudley will likely get out and on good behaviour, and he'll be free again in probably early 2044. But he should never see the light of day again. And when he gets out, he could be in his 60s. What do you think about this case, guys? Have you heard it before? Let me know in the comments section, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.